starting early because I've got a lot to say, and it's got an early morning tomorrow. A lot of important things happening. So I'm glad you're all here. I know people will trickle in as we do this. You know, I'm not in a contest to get likes and shares. I'm here to communicate with the people that are part of our community and love our values and are part of the project of building in a real way. So I'm starting early. Glad you all are here. I know people will be drifting in as we go. So let's do this.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here with you all tonight. Now, the way this works, I generally give opening remarks, which is what I am doing right now. I give my opening remarks. Then we do the roll call. We find out who is watching, which is always fun because we have a great audience. Then I answer your questions, and then the stream ends and I go to sleep. And that is what I intend to do because tomorrow is going to be a big day for me. International guests are in town, etc. I think it's all public, but whatever. I'm not going to say too much about it, but big day for me tomorrow. Got stuff I got to do. I just had a great dinner. Shout out to Peter and Shruti. Great dinner with you all. And I also had a great day in that I picked up 1,000 copies of this from the printer. And I packed them up in, they were packed for me in boxes. And they're going to find their way out to Chicago pretty soon. And I'm very, very happy about it. So do you believe in growth? 1,000 new copies of it. It was a big hit at the Libertarian Party convention. It's going to be just as big a hit on the streets of Chicago and Milwaukee. Now I just got to figure out how to get myself out to Chicago with a bunch of them. Great day. I'm glad I could go out to the other side of the city in a taxi and load it up, and it was complicated, but it's worth doing because, it's a printer that offers me a good rate. A lot of places you would print these would just totally rip you off. Not my printer. So I'm really happy that we got these. I do appreciate the donations to offset the costs, the folks who helped offset the cost. This is a really great pamphlet we put together as the Center for Political Innovation, explaining economic growth, giving our critique of wokeism. Let's talk about woke. If you want to read the text of it is all on the website of CPI. If you go to CPI USA and you go to media and you hit library, it's the top post. Do you believe in growth? But I'll just give you a link so you can read the whole thing. You can download the PDF if you want. You can read the whole thing for yourself. We are going to be giving out thousands of copies of those in the coming months, the coming weeks, really. It was good to go pick up another 1,000 copies of them. That was good. So I took care of that today. If you want to help offset the costs, donations are still appreciated, right? We still got to figure out the cost of transporting them to Chicago and all of that. You can send a donation to Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App. Thank you to everyone who did send a contribution. I think I got 3 contributions. One was significantly larger, and thank you to that person. If you would like to donate to help, offset the cost of, printing these and sending them off to Chicago, by all means, contributions are appreciated on Cash App. And thank you very much to everyone who helped out. And if you want to read the contents, we have a video of me reading the whole thing. And we also just have, the text you can read on the CPI website. This is our little booklet that in a few pages, I think about 40 pages. In 39 pages. 41 pages. It tells you everything you need to know about CPI. Beautiful, beautiful pamphlet. Everything you need to know about why capitalism is holding back development, why the anti-imperialist countries are rising, why wokeism is not communism, and where it's come from. And you get the whole shebang is in this booklet. We've given away over 1,000 already, and we're just going to keep doing it. So I'm really glad I got them from the printer. That's the good thing. The other thing is every morning on the CPI channel, we have been doing morning messages. And I got to schedule the one for tomorrow morning before I go to sleep here. But there's plenty to do. Hold on. I'll just pull up the image of the morning messages. All righty. Oh, here we go. Yeah. On the CPI YouTube channel, every morning, we have a morning message. And the morning messages, they go up. It's about helping people start their day with revolutionary hope and optimism. And we do them on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. It's a great thing to do when our group starts to, we were doing them for a while and then we stopped. But now we're getting them going again. And part of that is about keeping the momentum of the organization, getting us connected to each other every day. It's a beautiful thing. And, CPI is much bigger than just me. I may be a guy with a YouTube channel who gets on here every night and talks, but CPI is so much bigger than me. It's a beautiful community of people that are inspired by our message. Just was one of our members today was talking about how there was a friend of hers who cut her off when she told them that she was a communist, cut her off, and now they've reestablished contact with her, explaining how horrified she is by the attempted assassination of Trump and the left's response to it. And that shows you we are offering something completely different with CPI, a community of people who support each other. Every morning on the CPI YouTube channel, we have a morning message. Great one this morning by Patrick talking about the delusions of the left. We've had some great ones so far, and shout out to everyone who's made one. And we now have a special link if you want to make one for yourself. If you want to make one of your own, you can do that, because we want people to submit them, right? There's a lot of people in this community who watch this channel, who want to be part of it, want to be connected with other people. So if you want to make a morning message, you can send one. We have a special link that Peter Coffin created. Figured out the technical details of creating it. So for you to submit a morning message, and that's the link to submit a morning message. So there it is. Submit a morning message by that link. All you have to do is you can either film it right there, or you can have the file on your phone or upload it from there. It's really a great way to stay in touch with our community. So morning messages every morning on the CPI YouTube channel. We're going strong. Pretty soon we're a couple weeks away from our 100th message, which is going to be very satisfying when it comes. And I'm sure the 1,000th one will be even more satisfying. We are a community of people who support each other and stand together. We're called the Center for Political Innovation, and we believe in a new America for working families, a government of action for working families. And if you want to join our efforts and get behind and be part of a community that's cultivating our unique, revolutionary, anti-imperialist, working class, pro-American patriotic message, by all means, become a member of CPI. Our website is cpiusa.org. Love to have you. Love to have you. A lot of great things are happening. We are marching ahead. We are moving ahead. We are in the middle of a great organizational turn in which we are beginning to expand. New people are joining, and new activity is happening, and we are invigorated with new energy, and I'm very, very excited. So the way these streams work, as I mentioned before, first I give opening remarks. Then after that, I do the roll call. Then after that, I answer your super chat questions or your Rumble rant questions on the Rumble. And so far, we have 2 super chat questions that have come in, one from John and one from Gala. And so I'll be answering those. If there's Rumble rants that come in, I'll be answering those as well. And we are just going to march forward. So if you have something for the second half of the show, do what Gala did, do what John did, and send a super chat. That's the way it works. And now I'm going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight. And take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to breathe. I'm going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight because I've got a lot to say. I've got a lot to say. And first thing I want to say, for those of you who may be watching who are new to this kind of politics, is that we are not woke here. We love our community. We love our country. We don't want to tear this country apart and destroy it. We want to make it better. We want jobs and healthcare and education for all. You know, I am a person who can sometimes complain a lot, right? Don't we all? Aren't we all complainers? But amid my complaining, there is one thing that I know for damn sure, is that I grew up in a household where I had a mom and a dad, both of whom were working. We sat down every night and ate dinner together as a family. And no matter what other hardships I had in my life, no matter what other difficulties I went through, the fact that I had that growing up gave me a huge head start. Any kid who grows up in a household where they have two parents together who love each other, they're not facing unemployment, they're not facing poverty, and their family is there for them and sits down with them every night to have dinner. Any kid who grows up with that gets a huge head start in life. A huge head start in life. And I want every kid in America to grow up with that huge head start that I got. The foundation of having, to some degree or other, a stable home environment, a stable family life, right? No matter what other hardships that might happen, no matter whatever difficulties, I've got plenty to complain about, as do you, as do all of us. We all have things we can complain about, things that went wrong, things that were unfair to us. But regardless, that foundation has given me a huge, huge head start in life. And that said, woke politics is not about trying to make the country better. It's not about trying to have a better society. It is about unleashing people's rage, unleashing people's desire for vengeance, unleashing people's jealousy, unleashing people's hatred. And that is a politics I want nothing to do with. I respect people's private lives and their right to live it privately, their right to do what they want in their own bedrooms. I respect the fact that racism is a big foundational problem for this country, slavery, the genocide of the indigenous people, Jim Crow segregation, the problems facing the Black community. I respect and I acknowledge that. And I admire the Black Panthers, and I admire Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I am a supporter of the Black liberation movement and Black nationalism. I believe that Black people, as a colonized people, have the right to determine the course of integration or separation for themselves. So we don't deny that racism exists. We're not trying to tell anyone how to live their private life. But that said, we are not trying to destroy things. And there is a movement right now that is using social media to foment vengeance, to foment insanity, to foment hate, to foment jealousy between people, to foment resentment, to foment pessimism, to foment degrowth and the idea that human beings are a cancer on the planet. And that is a movement that I reject. I love you as a human being. I think that you have a great contribution that you could make. You have a creative mind that could do something great. I think that human beings are an amazing species that have gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel and iPhones in just a few thousand years, 7,000 or 8,000 years. We've done miracles, and I love that aspect of humanity, that creative power of human beings. And that's why I reject wokeism. But I'm also a socialist. And that might be confusing because nowadays there's a huge effort to try and convince people that wokeism is socialism. When a lot of the socialist groups have fully embraced wokeism, certainly not helping. But socialism is the idea that the centers of economic power, the banks and the factories and the means of production, the big banks and the corporations, these things should be under the control of the people. And they should be operated to work in the interests of the whole country. so that we can raise people up out of poverty, so we can create jobs for all, not let any human labor get wasted or pushed aside, so we can construct, we can build, we can advance, we can rise to a higher plane of existence. Socialism means having a rationally organized economy, so no longer do we have a situation where people become hungry because there is too much food, or homeless because there are too many houses. Socialism is about organizing the economy to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. In a socialist society like China or Vietnam or Cuba or Venezuela or Nicaragua, the state has a 5-year economic plan of development, and the corporations that are publicly controlled and the private companies are all organized in order to make sure that the country has economic growth, and the state oversees the expansion of living standards, and no human being is left out. The potential of every individual is utilized to build up and strengthen the overall economy. I want a rationally planned economy, and I don't believe in the free market and the invisible hand and its ability to make a good society. The free market and the invisible hand is leaving people behind. And I don't believe in the free market and the invisible hand. I believe in popular power. I believe in economic democracy. I believe in the rational ability of human beings to rise above the irrationality of the market and profits. I believe in socialism. And I've been to socialist countries, and I believe that we can eventually get to a society with so much wealth and so much abundance that the need for a state can wither away. I believe we can get to a society with so much wealth and so much abundance that everyone has enough, and that there's really no inequality because everyone has enough. There's enough to go around, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his need. I believe we can get to a society where the need for the government itself fades away because human creativity and human abundance has expanded so much that no one is oppressing anybody else. No one's trying to tear anyone else down. And that ultimate goal of a world with so much wealth and so much prosperity, that ultimate goal is called communism. That's called the higher stage of communism. And the way to achieve it is with vast expansion of the means of production, vast expansion of living standards, and that's only possible if you get rid of an irrational system where people only work if a boss can make profits off their labor. And technology and the advances of human creativity lead to greater poverty and greater chaos in the economy. We need a rationally organized economy. Human beings must take control of the economy and allow the economy to become rationally organized so it can continue to grow and grow and grow and expand. So I am a socialist, and I believe that we can get to communism. I guess you could say I'm a communist, but not in the way that a lot of people understand it. I believe in God. I believe in right and wrong. I do not advocate violence. I want a peaceful transition to socialism. Right? I am an admirer of what the Chinese Revolution has done, what the Cuban Revolution has done, what the Venezuelan and Nicaraguan revolutions have done. I'm an admirer of what the Soviet Union achieved in defeating the Nazis and inventing space travel. But I know that none of those systems are ever going to come to this country. That when socialism comes to this country, it will be a uniquely American brand of socialism. The socialism of China is called socialism with Chinese characteristics, and the only type of socialism we will ever have here in America will be socialism with American characteristics, a socialism rooted in our own conditions, our own struggles, our own culture, our own national identity and character as a people. And that if we're serious about making America socialist, we need to be cobbling together and cultivating and developing an American socialism, not hating our own people, not trying to make things worse, not condemning our country as outsiders, and furthermore, not trying to copy some other country and some other way of doing it. And I also recognize that socialism doesn't always come in the form of Marxist-Leninist governments. That's the way it happened first. But in Iraq and in Syria, they had Ba'athist Arab socialism, a uniquely Arab type of socialism rooted in Islam and the Arab culture. And I respect Baathism as a form of socialism. And in Venezuela and in Nicaragua, they have Bolivarian socialism. that is a mixture of different ideas, Marxism, but also Christianity and the Bible, also native indigenous practices, also the teachings of the anti-colonial fighter Simón Bolívar. And I respect Bolivarian socialism as a form of socialism. In the Islamic Republic of Iran and in Lebanon, in the areas controlled by Hezbollah, and in Yemen, under the leadership of the Revolutionary Committee, they have cultivated a system they say is not socialism. They say it is neither socialism or capitalism. They call it not capitalism, but Islam. But it has 5-year economic plans. And the government organizes the economy in order to ensure economic growth. And they openly study and admire China. And they openly admire and study Venezuela. And I recognize that form of anti-imperialism, Shia Islam, whatever you want to call it, the axis of resistance in the Middle East. I recognize that as a form of anti-imperialism, and whether they want it to be called that or not, I recognize that as a form of socialism. I look at what exists in the Donetsk People's Republic and how the heroic people of the Donbass have resisted the imperialists, and how they are marching into battle every day in the battlefields of the Donbass. And they march into battle with big pictures of Lenin and hammers and sickles in one hand, and pictures and icons, Orthodox icons of Jesus in the other. And they march into battle recognizing that both Lenin and Stalin and the hammer and sickle, as well as Jesus and the Orthodox Church, they are both part of their unique identity as a people, as great Russia, as a people that are not Western, as a people that are not corrupted by the individualism of our Western society that says everyone can step on everybody else and no one has any obligation to anyone else. I respect that as a form of socialism. Socialism comes in all different varieties, but socialism is anti-imperialist, because we don't live under ordinary capitalism, and I am not against ordinary capitalism. I'm not against the bar owner in your neighborhood who's worked really, really hard to build up his small business. I am not against somebody who works really, really hard to develop a new form of software and a new idea, and I think people like that should make millions of dollars and be very wealthy for the hard work and the innovation that they go through. I love small business owners. I love inventors. I love creative people. I don't love international bankers. I don't love Jeff Bezos. I don't love the Silicon Valley tech monopolies. I don't love the military contractors that make money from war and death and destruction in the Pentagon with our tax money. I don't love the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Carnegies and the big bankers. That's who I don't love. I love innovators and creators, and I know that they are the backbone of 21st century socialism. It is the micro entrepreneurs of Nicaragua that have made their socialism successful. It's the Jack Ma's and the Alibabas. It is the telecommunications giant Huawei. It is the inventors and the innovators that are a key aspect of 21st century socialism. I am not against self-made men. I am not against hardworking people and creative people. I am against grifters and parasites, the ultra monopolies that are propped up by the imperialist governments that are trying to keep the world poor in order to make themselves rich. That is what I am against. I am against capitalism in its monopolistic stage, imperialism. And I know that the only way we can defeat the rule of the international bankers and the rule of the big monopolies and their system is with governments of action, popular power. That's the only thing that has ever stood up to these people, whether it was great presidents in our history like Abraham Lincoln or Roosevelt, or great governors like Huey Long of Louisiana, great leaders like Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, or Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua, great leaders like Mao Zedong and Stalin, or Enver Hoxha of Albania, great leaders that have built their countries up, great leaders like Gaddafi, who raised his country up from poverty. When Gaddafi was running Libya, it had the highest life expectancy in Africa. He was going to make an independent African currency. The only thing that has ever been able to challenge the power of imperialism, the big bankers and the international monopolies, is a government of action. A powerful government that rallies common people in an upsurge of democratic participation to defeat the power of the bankers and the monopolies. And that is what I believe in. and I have seen it in practice. I have been to Central Caracas. I have been to the hills of Nicaragua and the neighborhoods of Nicaragua where the citizens' power councils of the Sandinistas hold power. I have been to the Islamic Republic of Iran and seen what the Basij carries out. I have been to Russia. I have been to Crimea, and I've seen what the people there have done. I am telling you, there is a new system rising in this world. And this system is not the old Soviet socialism. Everything isn't run by the government. But this system is not capitalism. It is not capitalism because it has a government that controls the economy while enabling people to be creative and brilliant, while subsidizing small business owners and unleashing their creativity. And that system based on economic growth. That system based on economic growth and expansion. That system based on creating strong families held together by love. That system based on economically empowering people and investing in the population, in the people with education and healthcare and jobs, not investing in prisons and bombs and drones. That system, that pro-growth, humanity-centered system, that is the future. And the only hope we have in America is for that kind of system to come into existence over here. We need a government of action to fight for working families. That is what we need, and that is what I advocate. And that's what I believe. Take it or leave it. I am not woke. I am not one of the woke people trying to destroy my country for Wall Street and spread chaos and regime change instability around the world. And I am not a libertarian free market advocate who thinks we can just let the government sit aside while the people starve and go into misery. I believe in a popular state that beats back the power of ultra monopolies and organizes the economy to lift the people out of poverty. I want a government of action that fights for working families. And that is what the Center for Political Innovation advocates. And we are an educational project that seeks to educate Americans about what imperialism actually is and what the forces around the world that are fighting imperialism believe in. And that's what we're all about. And it is with that understanding and analysis that I can tell you what I think about what's happening in the world today. What's going on? Why did Donald Trump get shot on the top of his ear? Well, I'm going to tell you. But first, I'm going to tell you that the response of the woke people to what happened to Donald Trump on Saturday is utterly horrendous. First, the idea that Donald Trump staged this is absurd. Do you know how close an ear is to your head? As much as one can criticize Trump, the idea that Donald Trump would pay a hitman to shoot him that close to his brain is ridiculous. Second, maybe you didn't notice, but there was somebody behind Trump who died from actual bullets. The idea that Donald Trump staged this against himself is completely insane. And now we can see the Secret Service was not adequately protecting him. Now we can see all kinds of information about what happened. And the idea that this is some big conspiracy is just absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Second, the idea that Donald Trump should be killed, which is what I continue to hear leftist people say, oh, he missed, ha, ha, ha. I am utterly horrified by that. Because if you haven't noticed, the people saying that are on the same side as the mainstream media. because the mainstream media says Donald Trump fell. He tripped. That was the headline on CNN. He fell. He got injured. Joe Biden won't call this an assassination attempt. A number of people won't even use the word assassination attempt to describe this. And by doing that, by not calling it an assassination attempt, they are more or less endorsing what happened. They are endorsing what happened. John Bolton said that if Donald Trump was ever elected president again, the USA would withdraw from NATO. I hope that happens. I hope Donald Trump is elected and the USA withdraws from NATO. Many forces have said that if Donald Trump becomes president again, it will be a huge loss for this globalist imperialist system, and it will be a huge victory for countries like China and Russia and North Korea and Cuba and others that have broken out of this system. I think that's a great thing. And there's nothing that horrifies me more than seeing people who speak in the name of socialism and communism, who are on the same side as the mainstream media, on the same side as John Bolton, because Trump said naughty words. Trump wasn't a great president necessarily. I mean, he was better than Biden. He did some good things as president, did some awful things too. But seeing the way the left is celebrating and seeing that the celebration and the left is disappointed that Donald Trump isn't dead, seeing that that's coming from the same place as the people that are mad at Trump because they don't think he's warlike enough. They don't think he's regime change oriented enough. That is infuriating to me. And it's utterly horrifying. I think a little bit later in the broadcast, I'm going to tell you about some of the groups that are running the protests against the Republican convention. Because it's important to know this. This is a field of knowledge that I have that other people don't have. I was a member of the Workers' World Party for 8 years, and I've been in communist groups my entire adult life. Communism saved my life, right? And I mean, when I was a young person, they taught me to go out and do outreach, and that you become a better person by doing outreach, by doing political organizing. It is a journey of personal transformation. And as much as I don't agree with him and I reject a lot of his ideas, I wrote this book, Letter to Bob Avakian. And in this book, I acknowledge that if it hadn't been for his group taking me out there and teaching me to sell newspapers and pushing me to engage with people, I never would have gotten anywhere in life. And that, you know, I'm part of a movement. I'm part of a community. I'm not simply on the internet, part of a fandom. So, you know, I am qualified to speak about communist groups in America, most of which are completely irrelevant. But I am qualified to speak about them. And I will speak about that later in the stream. But I'm going to tell you what's happening and why it is that the deep state is at war with itself. I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to tell you, and I mean, this is not a new analysis. I draw from people who talked about it before me. And I go into great length about it in the CPI textbook, Out of the Movement to the Masses, which goes over the history of communist groups. I also go into great length about it in this book that I wrote, which was featured on Kim Iverson's show, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. You know, and I'll just tell it to you. Carroll Quigley, the mentor of Bill Clinton, a very well-respected academic, he wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope. He wrote another book called The Anglo-American Establishment, and he argued that in the post-World War II years, the way the U.S. political spectrum was divided was between the entrenched wealth and power based in New England, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the DuPonts, the wealthy families that have been in power for a long time, and the military-industrial complex and the new wealth located in the South and the West. The southern states and in the West, you had a layer of new wealth that sprung up. And that there has been a push and pull, a fight between the Eastern establishment or the Anglo-American establishment and the lower levels of capital. And that has really defined American politics. McCarthyism, after World War II, the Communist Party, which was a big, major political force in the 1930s, had backed up Roosevelt. There was a wing of the Democratic Party that was aligned with the Communist Party. It was the pro-Roosevelt, the Roosevelt wing of the Democrat Party was aligned with the Communist Party. And after Roosevelt died and after World War II, the U.S. economy was booming, and the political establishment of the United States crushed the Communist Party. And there was an anti-communist hysteria in the United States called McCarthyism. The Communist Party was forcibly broken up. The leaders of the Communist Party went to prison. It was, forcibly, the Communist Party was ended, more or less. And there was a layer of people in the American political system who were considered to be anti-communist, but they took the anti-communism a little too far in ways that made the government and the system a little bit unhappy. Joe McCarthy became the symbol of that. Joe McCarthy was a member of Congress from Wisconsin, and he started criticizing the CIA and saying that the CIA was communist. And he started saying that the U.S. Army was communist. And he started saying all kinds of things were communist. And if you listened to what Joe McCarthy and his allies were saying, they were not really just against communism. They were against the ultra-rich. They were against the big monopolies, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies, etc. And they thought they were communist. But they weren't. They weren't communists. They were just socially liberal. They were just, not as anti-communist and free market oriented as Joe McCarthy was. And McCarthyism went from being it started out with the Democrats purging their own house of the Roosevelt wing. Then it turned into the Republicans accusing the Democrats of being soft on communism. And then within the Republican Party, it was something like MAGA is today. It was an uprising of small business owners and lower level capitalists against the government itself, which they accused of being communist. And that's why Joe McCarthy was publicly humiliated, exposed for being gay and a molester, and ended up drinking himself to death. And that's why you had the rise of post-war liberalism. And during the early 60s, you had an organization in America called the John Birch Society. And the John Birch Society was a far-right anti-communist organization that was mocked in the media. They played songs making fun of them in the mainstream media. They were demonized on television. And the government and the FBI broke them up, basically, and infiltrated them, forced them to adopt pro-Israeli politics, etc. And the John Birch Society was, kind of forced into obscurity because it represented lower level capitalists who were against the establishment. Jack Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society, he was the owner of a candy company. He's just a lower level capitalist. He owned a few factories where people made candy. He didn't like labor unions. He didn't like communists because he was the owner of a factory. But he thought that the big bankers and the big corporations were all communists. And what the John Birch Society and the far right talked about in the 50s and 60s was the fact that after the Communist Party was crushed, the CIA had launched a program called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And the Ford Foundation and various Rockefeller think tanks began pouring money into liberal activism. Yeah, it was Robert Welch. You're correct, Nevin. Into liberal activism. And those liberal activist groups that they funded, they were not socially conservative. A lot of the Rockefellers funded Planned Parenthood. They funded the research of Alfred Kinsey. And they also funded, the civil rights movement, which was obviously a good thing. And they funded, people that were critical of the Vietnam War, pacifists and others. And there was a lot of money being handed out by the ultra rich to liberals to push back against the lower level capitalists. And they were successful. And you had the 60s cultural revolution, the rise of rock and roll music. You had, it's why they called it the British invasion, because it was big corporations and monopolies that were part of that Anglo-American establishment tied in with Britain. They're the ones that brought this wave of social liberalism, the hippie counterculture, the drug culture that was brought to us by the CIA and Project MKUltra, but promoted by the rock and roll bands from the British invasion. Cultural liberalism was very much promoted by the upper levels of capital to push back against the John Birch Society and the far right, the lower levels of capital. And as a result of this, the civil rights movement gave rise to the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Panthers, etc. The anti-Vietnam War protest movement quickly turned into a communist-led movement with Students for a Democratic Society and others. And as a result of that, you had Richard Nixon brought in to be an authoritarian strongman to stabilize the country. And Richard Nixon was brought in, but Richard Nixon, to some degree or other, was a part of this lower level of capital, this far right, and so he was removed. He was impeached, and you had the rise of Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter was a degrowth president. And Jimmy Carter, he got rid of all the state laws about money lending. He brought Paul Volcker to run the Federal Reserve and get rid of all the laws against big banks ripping people off with predatory loans. And Jimmy Carter told the American people they should be poorer. And he published the Global 2000 report of the White House that said that that there's too many people in the world. We need to drive down living standards. And Jimmy Carter's national security advisor was Zbigniew Brzezinski, and Zbigniew Brzezinski was the father of soft power and manipulation. And he's the guy who started the war in Afghanistan, created the Afghan trap, as he later called it, got the Soviet Union into a situation where they felt they had to move into Afghanistan, and then used the war in Afghanistan to cause all kinds of problems for the Soviet Union. Brzezinski, the national security advisor of Jimmy Carter, who had the strategy of making the United States look weak economically, crashing the U.S. economy with creating energy scarcity so that more profits flew into the pockets of the big banks, creating an energy crisis, driving down living standards in the United States, telling Americans that they should be poorer, they need to be poorer, while engaging in all kinds of soft power manipulation around the world to foment, confusion. That was the liberal strategy, right? And it devastated the U.S. economy at the end of the 70s. And there was kind of a lower level capitalist uprising with Ronald Reagan, leading forces from the military industrial complex and other layers to push Jimmy Carter out. But Ronald Reagan was forced to pick George Herbert Walker Bush as his running mate, an old money New England establishment Republican, a CIA guy. And Ronald Reagan very much backed away from some of his far-right policies and was very much a neoconservative president, brought the neocons into the White House, gave Brzezinski the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and U.S. politics was stabilizing at that point at the end of the Cold War. And this has always been the push and pull in the United States between the lower levels of capital and the Eastern establishment. The Eastern establishment are social liberals that want economic degrowth to stabilize capitalism. They want to reduce consumption, drive down living standards. And the lower levels of capital are libertarian. They want free market policies, and they're obsessively anti-communist. They think communism is the enemy. They don't want to negotiate. They don't want to be strategic. They just want to fight the Reds and fight the commies. That's been American politics for some time. But we are in a unique situation, which is that around the world, a number of countries that were down for the count at the end of the Cold War are up and rising. Russia is a major power in the world. Their economy rebooted in the 21st century. They're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. China is the second largest economy in the world. A big chunk of Latin America has asserted its independence and become Bolivarian socialist. There's a rising wave of anti-imperialism around the world. A lot of African countries are rising up from poverty and aligning with Russia and China. And so the imperialists are fighting among themselves. And there is a fight now between the ultra-rich, the Eastern establishment, and the lower levels of capital. But there's been a big change, which is that now the lower levels of capital are more anti-war than the upper levels of capital. The lower levels of capital just want to make money. They just want to make money. They want economic growth because they want to make money. They want government deregulation because they want to make money. But they also want to make money by trading with Russia and China and doing business with them. And they also want to make money by being part of this new economy that's rising in the world. Whereas the ultra-rich, the big monopolies, are determined to stay at the top by any means possible. And in order to stay at the top, not only do they want all-out war against Russia, all-out war against China, all-out war against Venezuela and Iran, they also want to drive down living standards here at home. Look at the World Economic Forum and what they've said about how you'll own nothing and be happy about it. You'll live in a pod. You'll eat bugs. This is their scheme to save capitalism from a long-term crisis of overproduction, from the tendency of the falling rate of profit. They want to create a prison state, and they want to dominate the world at all costs, whereas the lower levels of capital just want to make money. Now, what's important to note is that a lot of the lower level capitalists who just want to make money are Zionists. I mean, the upper levels of capital are also Zionists, but there's a lot of lower level capitalists that are Netanyahu Zionists, meaning that they love Israel. They own property in Israel. They've got companies. They make money. They love Israel. And they want Israel to do whatever it wants, even if it goes against the interest of the overall, globalist imperialist economy. Whereas the upper levels of capital, they also support Israel, but they see Israel as an outpost of their global system. And they would like to restrain Israel to some degree because Israel makes a lot of people mad by killing Palestinians, etc. And so there's a push and pull. And Donald Trump is very much a champion of the lower levels of capital. That's why he's so pro-Israel. That's why, though, he's open to being friendlier to Russia. That's why it's complicated. And I want you to understand that what the higher levels of capital have created, when you talk about Brzezinski, right? When you talk about Zbigniew Brzezinski, right? The upper levels of capital have created a global intelligence regime change apparatus. Billions and billions and billions of our tax dollars goes into covert CIA operations and programs that are trying to make things worse in various anti-imperialist countries. Take Tibet, for example, right? It's one example, right? Part of China is called Tibet. And there is a movement, of people who fled Tibet who want to make Tibet an independent country. Take a look at all the Hollywood movies, all of the Tibetan Buddhist seminaries, all of the activism, everything, right? If you look at how much money has been poured into Tibet separatism, you're talking about billions and billions of dollars. And there's thousands of people, probably tens of thousands of people, whose income depends on the USA wanting to break apart China and separate Tibet from China. So if the US government were to turn around and say, you know what, Tibet is part of China, which is actually officially US government policy. USA recognizes one China, but the USA is clearly behind the Tibet separatist movement. If you were to actually do that, there'd be all kinds of people that were out of work. And this could be said for every country in the world. All over the world, the US government is pumping money into people whose job it is to destabilize and make things worse and push back against Russia and China and push back against anti-imperialist forces all over the world. The Muslim Brotherhood is a cultivated asset of American intelligence. There's people all over South and Central America. This is vast apparatus. And that apparatus does not like Trump. That apparatus that includes hundreds of thousands of people, billions of taxpayer dollars, you could call it Regime Change Incorporated. They are terrified that Donald Trump will get into office and turn off the spigot to some degree, or just turn down the amount of our taxpayer money and money from the Ford Foundation and money from the Rockefeller think tanks that pours in to that apparatus, because their lives depend on that apparatus. Their entire existence George Soros, he's a billionaire from Hungary. How did he get his money? Well, he was a middleman, right? The CIA would basically work with him to fund dissidents in the Eastern Bloc. He'd pay for protest movements in Czechoslovakia or in the former Soviet Union. And then they would provide him information about currency. They give it basically insider trading. And then he would currency trade. He would manipulate currency and he would make lots of money. And George Soros was a professional money mover. He basically funded dissident movements for the CIA in exchange for getting, inside information so that he could manipulate currencies and make lots of money. He's a billionaire. That's how he makes his money. He made his money as a currency speculator. And he would then fund the money that he got into various dissident movements across Eastern Europe to fight against the Soviet Union. He was an anti-communist manipulator who funded liberal protest movements against communism. And there's a lot of people like him. And they would all lose all of their money if Donald Trump did what he said he was going to do and said, I'm going to put America first. I'm going to put America first. And if he turned off the money, the flow of money to all these liberal protest movements that are subsidized and all of the targeting and all of the covert apparatus of manipulating art and culture and media and staging protests, if he turned off the money to the color revolution apparatus, if he turned off the money to the regime change movement that says we're going to go overthrow governments around the world, hundreds of thousands of people would lose their jobs. Billions and billions of dollars would be lost by the military industrial complex, by the nonprofit industrial complex, there's a lot at risk. And when you talk about the deep state is very big, right? We're talking about unelected government agencies, unelected government officials that do things. We're talking about a very big apparatus. And there's people in the deep state that are for Trump, no question about it. But there is a much bigger apparatus of the deep state that is committed to these regime change goals and these regime change operations. And they find Trump's rhetoric and Trump's disinterest in what they do for a living to be threatening. Donald Trump is not an anti-imperialist. Donald Trump is certainly not a sympathizer with anti-imperialist countries. But Donald Trump just doesn't give a shit. Donald Trump, the Miami Cubans who hate communism are a big part of Donald Trump's support base. And they hate Venezuela. And during Trump's presidency, there was, they staged a false flag. They burned a food truck. There was a food truck that was going into Venezuela. They lit it on fire and they say, Maduro lit the food truck on fire, and they did everything they could to try and get a situation where the USA would move with the military into Venezuela, but it didn't work. Didn't work. And so what did Donald Trump do? He said, I'm bored. He said, I'm bored. I don't want to talk about Venezuela anymore. I'm bored. John Bolton was horrified. Elliot Abrams was horrified. Mike Pompeo was horrified. Donald Trump said, I'm bored. Donald Trump was more concerned about getting reelected than overthrowing the government of Venezuela. So he was just like, you know what? I'm bored. And they moved on from Venezuela. They did a lot of bad things, but Donald Trump got bored with it because it wasn't going to win him any poll numbers. And in all of Donald Trump's meetings, he was constantly just talking about approval ratings and poll numbers and how he was doing. And he knew the Venezuela thing, it might have been popular with Marco Rubio and it might have been popular with Mike Pompeo, but it really wasn't flying with the American people. The American people didn't want a new war in Venezuela. And so he just said, you know what? I don't care. I'm bored. Moving on. Donald Trump went to North Korea and he met with Kim Jong-un. And the Democrats were furious with him. And all kinds of people were furious with him. How dare he meet with the North Koreans? Oh, my God. But the American people loved it because they wanted to see a leader make peace. Donald Trump loved it because he knew he would go down in history as the president who went to North Korea, the first American president who went to North Korea. Donald Trump didn't care. Donald Trump is selfish. And that is the best thing about him. Donald Trump is not a product of the regime change apparatus, right? He was not dreamed up in a lab, right, by regime change forces. Right? That's not who dreamed him up. That's not what happened. Right? Donald Trump is just a guy. He's just a guy. And, he's in it for himself. He loves to get media attention. He loves to troll the media and manipulate the media into covering him. And he very much has an alliance with the lower levels of capital who like to make money selling weapons and who also, like to, have this affinity and loyalty to Israel. So it's complicated. Donald Trump is not anti-Israel in any way that I can tell. And Donald Trump is not an anti-imperialist or anything like that. Donald Trump is just in it for himself. And that's good because he's not in it for them. He's not one of their creations. Kamala Harris is their creation. Joe Biden is their creation. Barack Obama was their creation from the day he was born. He was their creation. Donald Trump is not their creation. Donald Trump is just a very self-interested guy who, for his own reasons, has decided to become president and all of that. And that scares the regime change apparatus. And that's what the division in the ruling class is about. It is the Yankee and Cowboy war flipped. And Donald Trump is for the Cowboys. And the Cowboys are more anti-war. And the Yankee establishment, this billion-dollar apparatus of regime change and destabilization and managing imperialism and driving down living standards and degrowth and all of that, Donald Trump isn't part of it. And they can't stand that. They can't stand him because he's not part of it. Just like how all the conservatives thought that Obama was a communist when he took office, just because he'd said some vaguely critical things. That's what they think about Trump. Right? Trump may have murdered Qasem Soleimani. Trump may have, done awful things to Venezuela, but Trump met with North Korea. Trump wants to get along better with Russia. And so they see Trump as a threat to their apparatus. The Eastern establishment is convinced, especially because of the crisis, especially because Russia and China are rising, and especially because living standards here are going down. They are convinced that they are entitled to run the entire American political establishment. They think that they have the right to completely take over and lock down U.S. society into a low-wage police state and go all out with World War III against Russia and China so that they can stay at the top of the pyramid forever. And it's not going to happen. The American people aren't going to accept it. The lower-level capitalists aren't going to accept it. Russia and China ain't going to accept it. And so because of that, they can't stand Trump. Whereas there are a lot of lower-level capitalists who are very pro-Israel, a lot of them, not all of them, who are very pro-Israel, very anti-Iran, very anti-Venezuela, but not as anti-Russia, and not even really as anti-China, though some of them are, who are critical of the regime change apparatus, who find the moralistic bombast of the intelligence agencies and the woke stuff. They find that obnoxious, and they're not team players for this global imperialist system. And so Donald Trump represents them to some degree or other. And those folks, they just don't want Donald Trump in office. And it looks to me, conspiracy theories and all of that. Look, we're going to know the facts later, but it looks to me like to some degree or other, that apparatus doesn't want to protect Trump from assassination. Let me put it that way. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know exactly to what lengths that means, but if you look at the response of the mainstream media to what happened to Donald Trump, and if you look at a lot of other things that I'm sure you can think of that I'm not going to say on this stream, it seems that the color revolution regime change apparatus just doesn't trust Trump and considers him to potentially be turning off the spigot or lowering the amount of funding that they'll get. He's not part of their regime change, color revolution apparatus. And that's why they can't stand him. Right? They can't stand him, and they want him to go away. And one way or another, they are at war with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has realized that the only protection he's got is the American people. Right? He needs to get Americans to love him. So that's driving Donald Trump to do some interesting things. Now, I want to point out a couple of things to you. Today, Donald Trump announced who his VP would be. And you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it. I would have said it should have been Tulsi Gabbard, but honestly, Tulsi Gabbard hasn't been so great lately. I mean, she's gotten a little bit better in the last week or so, which is interesting. But, you know, I'll take it. But this guy, J.D. Vance, has said he doesn't want more funding for Ukraine. And why does he say he doesn't want more funding for Ukraine? Why? Why has he said that? Well, he said that because he said that it'll just get some Ukrainian oligarchs to buy more yachts. Did you see that? It'll get Ukrainian oligarchs to buy more yachts. Well, that's true. All right. Zelensky and his cronies are making out like bandits from the whole Ukraine thing. I've been telling you that from day one. And, you know, J.D. Vance, he understands that. J.D. Vance, he supported the UAW strike when it happened. That's big for a Republican to support a labor union strike. That's pretty good. I'll take it. J.D. Vance, his claim to fame is that he wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy, which I have not read. And maybe my wife and I will watch the movie here. And there's a lot of criticism of Hillbilly Elegy because it seems to repeat a lot of tropes about poor people being responsible for their own conditions. You know, put that aside. Hillbilly Elegy is about low-income white people. It's about a small town in southern Ohio. I think Middleburg, Ohio. Where is Middleburg, Ohio? I'm from Ohio. Middleburg, Ohio is the town that this guy grew up in. And it's about, examples of people who are in poverty. It's not southern Ohio. It's like central Ohio. People who are in poverty, low-income white people who are in poverty. And it talks about some of the ways that what he calls hillbilly culture or the culture of low-income white people contributes to that. Well, that's interesting to me. I mean, and I certainly wouldn't write a book from that perspective. But I got to tell you, in a way, that book is very, very revolutionary. Even though it may have a message that is not socialistic or advocating more of a welfare state or anything like that, it's very revolutionary because poor white people don't exist, according to mainstream media. You heard Joe Biden said it. Poor kids are just as smart as white kids. Well, white kids can be poor too, but not according to mainstream media. Not according to mainstream media. I am so tired of this. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and my family, we did okay. My mom and dad both had jobs, and they both had cars, and they drove to their jobs every day, and we had a house, and my parents both had cars and drove to work every day. And so we did okay, right? In my little town in Ohio. But, I went to school with kids who lived in trailers. I went to school with kids who were struggling to get by. And, I could go into detail about a lot of things that I have heard. I have heard doesn't happen to white people ever since I moved to New York City, right? I have heard white people don't work in fast food. I've worked in fast food. My town, the fast food restaurants there were full of white people. Oh, white people don't work in fast food. Those are the jobs that black and brown people have to do, but no white person ever has to do that. Yes, they fucking do. The McDonald's of this country, the Arby's, the Burger Kings are full of white people. But according to black woke activists in New York City, no white person has ever worked in fast food. And according to white woke middle-class liberals, no white person has ever worked in fast food. Only black people have to do that because of racism, etc. That's bullshit. the prisons of this country are full of people of color and full of white people. The military in this country is full of people of color and full of white people. Go to the Florida Panhandle. Go to West Virginia. Go to Appalachia, right? All of these people that the woke left don't think exist. It's not sexy to care about them, right? It's sexy to care about the poverty of black people because there's slavery and revolution and Black Lives Matter. It's all sexy. It's sexy to care about the suffering of Latin folks because it's they're eclectic or whatever. But low income white people don't exist according to mainstream media. And I can just tell you some of the tropes that I have heard, right? White people don't go to church. Yes, they do. This country is full of white people who go to church. White people don't beat their kids. This country is full of white people who beat their kids. I could go down the line. I have heard it all. Like the white people of this country that are working class, that are described in Hillbilly Elegy, don't exist according to mainstream media. So the fact that Donald Trump has picked a man who is very likely to become vice president of this country, who wrote a whole book about how low-income white people do exist, that makes him better than any of these fucking communists I've met. Seriously. They all think that poor white people don't exist, that anyone who does talk about poor white people and how they've suffered is a big neo-Nazi and a white supremacist, and no, poor white people do exist. Now, I don't agree. I mean, I haven't watched it, okay? I haven't watched or read Hillbilly Elegy. But the fact that J.D. Vance talks about drug addiction in low-income white people communities, the fact that J.D. Vance has said the solution to drug addiction is not imprisonment, but it's compassion and treatment. The fact that J.D. Vance is against sending money to Ukraine, I like him. I'll take him. You know what I mean? He's way better than Mike Pence. He's way better than Nikki Haley. He's way better than Marco Rubio. He's way better than a lot of the people that Trump could have picked as his VP. You know what I'm saying? I didn't expect him to pick, me. I didn't expect him to pick, somebody even better. And honestly, I would have expected Tulsi Gabbard, but then Tulsi Gabbard took a turn for the worse. And Tulsi Gabbard and this guy are about the same at this point. Tulsi Gabbard says good things about Russia and Ukraine. J.D. Vance says good things about Russia and Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard is a crazy anti-Iran Zionist, and so is this guy. This guy's a crazy anti-Iran Zionist. I'm liking the Republican ticket at this point. Exactly, Terry. He should have picked me, but there you go. There you go. But regardless, I think J.D. Vance, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Right? He's an insane Zionist, but so is Donald Trump. I mean, as far as I know, unless there's something that we don't know, Donald Trump is an insane Zionist. So is Tulsi, and so is J.D. Vance. But this guy who has made his career talking about the people that the woke crowd think don't exist, I like him. This guy who says that Zelensky is a billionaire and is filling up, buying new yachts and all that, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. So, J.D. Vance, I'll take it. And that's why I can see that there is a whole apparatus that is dedicated to destabilizing countries and that is involved in assassinations. Let's remember what happened to Daria Dugina. Let's remember what happened to Tatarsky. Let's remember that Ukraine kill list. Let's remember what happened to Shinzo Abe. Let's remember what happened to Fico in Slovakia recently. There is an apparatus of covert regime change actors that are very committed to assassinations. I think we can interpret the recent events with Donald Trump in that light. That's what I think we can interpret them as. And that Donald Trump, he's not representing anti-imperialism. He's not representing anti-Zionism. He's not even necessarily representing people that are anything but selfish. And their selfishness puts them at odds with the regime change apparatus. So, I'll take it. Right? Yeah, exactly, John. Exactly. So, so there you go. There you go. I'll take it. I'll take JD Vance. I'll take it. And, Donald Trump is, we want to talk about lesser of two evils. We used to oppose that as communists because it wasn't lesser of two evils. It was same evil. And now this is a situation where it is maybe lesser of two evils for the first time. That's how I see it. Now, CPI takes no position. We have a member who on his own, separate from our organization, is an RFK volunteer. He's a huge RFK supporter. We've got members that will probably vote for Biden. We've got members that will vote for the Green Party. We don't endorse any candidate. We are an education project. That's what we are. So we don't endorse any candidate, and we're going to keep doing our work, and hey, we got our booklet. Do you believe in growth? And we got great work to do. That's what we're doing. So, I will wrap up my opening remarks for tonight with this tidbit of information. And, well, there you go. And that's fine. We don't endorse anybody. I will wrap up my opening remarks tonight with this tidbit of information that I think is important, which is this. The main group that was organizing the protests in Milwaukee against the Republican convention that happened today is called Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And I actually made a video about them a couple weeks ago. You can go watch it. It's on my channel. I talk about the irony of some of their recent actions. But I want to tell you about Freedom Road Socialist Organization because I want you to understand a couple things. First of all, it's how they control organizations. And second of all, it's how anti-imperialists can get scammed. All right. Freedom Road Socialist Organization has been around a long time. In fact, I wrote about them in this book. In chapter 3, I talk about the history of the new communist movement. And Freedom Road Socialist Organization emerged in the mid-'80s as the new communist movement, the various groups that tried to form new communist parties that were aligned with China as they were dying in the 80s, when China made clear they didn't want a new party and the Soviet Union was getting ready to fall and everything was confusing. A bunch of leftovers from the Revolutionary Communist Party, who formed the Revolutionary Workers Headquarters, and then the Proletarian Unity League and the October League, and all these groups were falling apart. And so a lot of people who were just kind of left behind, there was a group of people that wanted to keep doing the Maoist thing, and they formed what was called Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And Freedom Road Socialist Organization was a variety of different people. You had to believe black people are a nation. You had to be pro-LGBT. You had to be, you had to believe in socialism in some vague sense. There's like 5 principles you have to agree with in order to be in Freedom Road. And then they keep all of their arguments and disagreements internal. They have democratic centralism. And within Freedom Road, there are people who think China's socialist. There's people that don't. There's people who think that Russia is imperialist. There's people who don't. And it's a mutt of various new communist movement groups. It's a mishmash, but they come out of Maoism. They hate Trotsky. They're opposed to Trotskyism. And, it's led by a clique of 10 or 15 boomers who were in various Maoist groups. And there's a lot of people in their 20s who've been joining them. Now, what's interesting about Freedom Road is that Freedom Road has never been great, right? There's a group of people who broke away from them in the late 90s because they thought they were too anti-imperialist. That group for a while was also using the name Freedom Road. Now it calls itself Liberation Road. Right. And those people, they wanted to support sanctions against Iraq and they were against the various socialist countries like Cuba. And, that group is now called Liberation Road. It's not confusing. But this group, they go to international communist conferences. They went to Belgium and they would sign the pro-Stalin declarations of the international communist groups. They were friendly with the Communist Party of Greece. And they make a point of saying that they believe in Stalin. And they have developed kind of a method where they go around U.S. society and they go around Facebook and the internet and they kind of track down anyone who's saying pro-Stalin things, right? Anyone who's talking like pro-Stalin or pro-Mao, and they kind of track them down and they get them to join their group. And they've been doing this 80s and 90s, basically. They scour the country looking for people who have hardline communist politics. And they try to recruit them. And they say, you don't have to agree with us, right? As long as you agree with these 5 points, you can join us. And they have a lot of people who like Stalin and like Mao and don't agree about very much else who join their group. And then what their group does is they encourage you to get a job at a labor union. They encourage you to get a job at a liberal NGO. They encourage you to join the local Democratic Party. And you never tell anyone that you're a communist. And you just kind of become a liberal activist. But you're in a secret club. You're in a secret club. And they give you a secret code name. And you go to a meeting once a month and you hide your cell phone. And you go to this meeting with only 5 other members. You're not allowed to know who else is in the group. And you meet with those 5 other members. And you engage in line struggle, arguing about Mao and Pol Pot. And they have elaborate internal arguments about obscure communist shit in a secret club. It's exactly what it is. And so you get to be part of this secret club where you argue about obscure communist shit with other people while you just become a liberal activist. And it's a scam. It's a brilliant, brilliant scam. Because at the end of the day, you're just being a liberal activist, right? You're just a functionary in one of their NGOs. You're just going to stop Trump rallies. You're just going to trans pride rallies. You're just sounding like a regular Democrat. But in your mind, oh, I'm part of this super revolutionary group because I get to have a line struggle with comrade number 3 and comrade number 12. And, and they have some like wild internal life. They're always battling for some kind of crazy positions. And very few of their members are allowed to publicly say they're in the group. Most of them have to be secret. And it's just a way to scam Stalin people. And you give them your money and you raise money for them. And they, you're a liberal activist. And, it's like you're supposed to be Clark Kent, right? Liberal activist by day, but at night, super revolutionary, except you're not super revolutionary. You're just in a secret club with secret code names. And it's really stupid. It's a very elaborate scam. And I don't know where all the money is going. I'm sure one of these boomers is living pretty well. A couple of them are probably, getting a really nice paycheck from the group off the records, because, we don't want the government to know about it or whatever. But sure, somebody at the top of it's making a lot of money. But at the end of the day, they're just liberal activists. They're liberal activists. And, that's what they are. What's interesting is there was a time where they did some good work. Right. And this is the other lesson. So the first thing is it's a scam. Right. And if you're in Freedom Road and you're watching this right now, I will tell you, you are being scammed. The people at the leading Freedom Road don't want a revolution. The people leading Freedom Road could care less about North Korea or China or Marxism, Leninism, or any of the stuff you talk about. They are scamming you. It's a scam. You are being used by Joe Biden. You are being used by Barack Obama. The government knows every single one of your names and doesn't give a shit. Okay? I'll just tell you that. And great example, before I get to the second part, is what has Freedom Road been doing for the past 5-6 years? Well, they have a club on their campus called Students for a Democratic Society. Various college campuses, they've set up an SDS club. And with their SDS club, they try to get Republican groups banned from campuses because they're racist. I got the screenshot. They're racist. One of them was in an elevator one time with somebody who once tweeted something homophobic. I got a screenshot. It's on my Discord. Oh my God. Yeah, that's what they do. And they brag about it. Go to Fight Back News. You can read all the articles they've written about how at some college, somebody tried to start an organization of Turning Points USA or Young Republicans, and they found a screenshot and they got into the Discord and they can prove that they're a racist, and they get them banned. And it is the most juvenile, incel, keyboard crunching, triggered by Republicans bullshit I've ever heard. Okay? But they think that's activism. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. I would laugh at this if I wasn't crying. But did y'all notice that this spring there was a wave of pro-Palestine protests that happened on the campuses? Do you know what happened to a lot of those pro-Palestine students at Columbia and at other schools, at smaller schools in Texas and California? What did they do to those students? They suspended them from school for protesting for Palestine, suspended them from school for saying from the river to the sea, suspended them from school for having a Palestinian flag. Do you know what rules the campus used to punish the pro-Palestine students? Why, those would be the very rules that Freedom Road has spent the last 5 or 6 years beefing up and working with campus administrations to use against Trumpers. So for the last 5 or 6 years, Freedom Road has been going around saying that the schools should kick out, expel, punish any student who's racist, which is what they consider all Trumpers to be. And now that mainstream media considers pro-Palestine students to be racist, even though Freedom Road supports the pro-Palestine students, they're very I mean, it didn't occur to them that, like, helping protect the campuses from Republicans at a time when Republicans are more anti-war. I mean, so there you go. That's what Freedom Road's been up to. I mean, that just shows you. I mean, they're just shills, right, for the Democratic Party. They're liberal activists who are in a secret Stalin fan club that they have a code name and they can't tell anyone about. So that's that. But they weren't always this bad. They were always bad. They weren't this bad. So I first got heavily involved in, I first met people from this group, etc., in 2010. And that's because in 2010, this group had its homes raided by the FBI. And that's because prior to 2010, this group, which operates in a semi-clandestine manner, they apparently were connected with some pro-Palestine organizations in the Chicago area. The people who set up Electronic Intifada, which is a pro-Palestinian website, great. And they were involved in defending somebody who was brought to the United States, a guy who was allegedly linked to the FARC in Colombia. And they were going to all his court dates and supporting him. And, you know, for the most part, they were just liberal activists, but they helped set up Electronic Intifada. They were pro-Palestine, and they, you know, were sympathetic to you know, this political prisoner from the FARC, and they, you know, they, to some degree or other, maintained an anti-imperialist political line. And then the FBI raided all their homes. And you'll notice now, you'll never see anything that they do. I mean, and it's really sad. And that what happened was that one of their leaders was photographed with Barack Obama. Right? Barack Obama was elected president, and one of their leaders, who's been very, very active in Chicago, as an activist and not open as a communist, very secretive or whatever, was in a photograph with Barack Obama. And that led, from what we understand, we don't really know, that led federal prosecutors to start investigating them. And there was a fear that because of some of their ties in the Democratic Party in Chicago or whatever, that they might influence local people in the Democratic Party in Chicago or people that were close to Obama to be pro-Palestine. So a federal prosecutor appointed by Barack Obama, who is very pro-Israel, sent the FBI to raid all their homes. Of course, that scared the crap out of them. And ever since then, all of their anti-imperialist work has completely flopped. They don't do that anymore. Now they're just liberal activists. And what's interesting is it wasn't a Republican that raided all their homes. It was a Democrat. There was fear on the part of the pro-Israel wing of the Democratic Party that this group that is bad in a lot of ways might nudge Democrats in Chicago to be more pro-Palestine. So they all got their homes raided by the FBI, and that scared the crap out of them, and they drifted the other way. And it's actually, it's important to know this, because just like it was Barack Obama and his administration who went after Freedom Road, it was Biden who went after the Uhuru movement and indicted the Uhuru movement and raided their homes, but the FBI has now charged them with being foreign agents. And that the Democrat Party is much more threatened by communists and socialists and leftists and people with any ties to anti-imperialism than the Republicans are. Because the Democratic Party is the party of the regime change apparatus. Your typical local Republican doesn't care what's going on in Ukraine. Your typical Democrat feels that it is their duty to have a Ukrainian flag in their window. And so the fact that Freedom Road, as a group allegedly with ties to the FARC, allegedly supporting the Palestinian resistance or whatever, had influence to some degree or other, and one of them got photographed with Barack Obama, caused the American Democrat Party deep state to attack them and neutralize them, right? And now, like, you know, the Freedom Road group, they are nothing but an anti-Republican mob, right? I mean, at this point, Donald Trump is running for president, saying he will settle the war in Ukraine. He just appointed somebody who's against sending weapons to Ukraine to be his VP, and they just had a crazy, hysterical anti-Trump rally that was just a bunch of CNN rhetoric. I mean, I heard some of it. Some of our members watched the stream and sent me little highlights, and I was just like, this is so sad. Because I remember when these groups, Freedom Road among them, they used to at least pretend to be anti-imperialist. They used to at least have some basic understanding of the shit we talk about on these streams. You know, what I just said about imperialism. I quoted Lenin. Lenin said imperialism is capitalism in its monopoly stage, an international financial oligarchy, trust cartels and syndicates. If you said that to your average Freedom Road member, they'd say that's anti-Semitism. You know, globalism is a Trumper buzzword. Right? I have had Freedom Road members claim that I'm a Nazi. I have had Freedom Road members threaten violence against me. All over the internet, Freedom Road people claim that I'm secretly a Nazi, a white supremacist, because, you know, they were part of the big cancel against me over Dugan. You know, I got canceled before BreadTube, before any of that, right? When I was in Workers' World was drifting closer to Freedom Road. And when I left Workers' World, I tried to leave on peaceful terms, friendly terms. That wasn't possible. And then the Freedom Road people went ape shit against me, you know, and, you know, it's a sad group. Right? It's a sad group. And, you know, they're the ones leading these protests against the Republican convention. You know, right? Because even though Trump is against the FBI, is against the deep state to some degree or other, I mean, maybe for his own selfish reasons, because Trump wants to, you know, none of that means anything to them. No, Trump is a big fat racist. It's so sad. Right. And, you know, you know, they're just kind of a woke liberal group. But the sad thing is that a lot of very legitimately smart anti-imperialist people join this group because they want to be in a group. Right. And I understand that. And nowadays, a lot of people don't join groups. In fact, I would say the majority of people that get interested in communism these days don't join groups. They just get on the internet and tear people down and become part of like internet clubs. Right. And, you know, I was in a group for a while and I watched all the groups become wokeified. Right? And it all started, I mean, it didn't all start, but during the Obama years, some stuff got weird. Some stuff got weird. And if you go to any, and groups just started getting weird, right? And suddenly they were talking about Judith Butler and mansplaining and all of that. And, I remember there was somebody I knew who was in Freedom Road, and they had their Congress, their national gathering. And he told me how ridiculous it was. Because at their national gathering, he said it was like a 5-day gathering, and it was all about line struggle, where they're getting up and debating their political line. And he said they spent an entire day arguing about cis privilege. Arguing about whether or not people who do not appear to be trans have privilege, including trans people who pass. And he said that they spent an entire day, a 12-hour session, arguing about cis privilege. And this guy told me, he was a friend of mine years ago, he told me, he got up and he said, when do we get to talk about communism? And nobody backed him up. Right? And it's just like all the communist groups started getting that way. Around the time Barack Obama was president, they all started getting weird really fast. And nobody talks about communism. Right? They all start talking about white male privilege and cis privilege and Judith Butler and mansplaining, and they all get a kindergarten atmosphere. If you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, if you hear me clap 3 times, and they get this like kindergarten atmosphere. And then suddenly they're not interested in communism anymore. Suddenly, if you've read any of these books behind me, sir, you must be on the spectrum and you must be autistic, because normal people don't know anything about facts and history, and they become a woke joke. They become kindergarten, and anyone who's a communist is treated like they have mental illness. You have a mental problem if you're actually interested in communism, if you actually want to know this stuff. And then on top of that, you're not allowed to talk about communism anymore. You just have to talk about woke shit. And that's that. So, that happened to Freedom Road, happened to Workers' World, happened to all the groups. And so I don't particularly blame them as a bad group. And I think their roots as an organization are quite interesting. But, they're not helpful. And they openly advocate violence. I mean, if you talk the way we talk on these streams, you are a Nazi as far as they are concerned. I mean, I've had Freedom Road people explain that I am a Nazi. Right? Can't be just that I'm wrong. Can't be just that I disagree. No, I'm literally a Nazi. Right? I'm the equivalent of Adolf Hitler. And these are nuts. These are nut jobs. These are insane human beings. These are not rational people. Right? And it's very sad what they've become. And part of that was the FBI raid. The FBI raid scared them, and it's unfortunate. And I will still defend them. If the FBI raided them again, I'd defend them. I would defend them. I defended them at the time of the FBI raid. I'd defend them again. But the FBI raid was used to control them. And it came from their own party, the Democrat Party. And even before the FBI raids, they supported the Democrat Party. They took that position. The Democrats are the better party. So, it is what it is. And so it's like, yeah, this rally, go and watch it for yourself. I saw Associated Press streamed the whole thing. And I saw various clips from it. There was not a single. It was all just anti-Trump hysteria. Nothing about jobs and education. All just about racist America, evil country, and all of this. Of course, they're there with the ILPS, Buy on USA, which is the U.S. wing of anti-China terrorists in the Philippines who murder Chinese businessmen, who are trying to align the Philippines with U.S. imperialism against China, right? That's ILPS. They were there with a number of Trotskyite groups and all of that. And it was a really small crowd. It wasn't even that big of a crowd. It was a small crowd of people with anarchist flags and communist flags and, ILPS flags talking about Trump's a big fat racist. And it's like, and that's the sad thing is these people don't get it, right? They really don't get it. If sounding just like CNN was a road to making yourself popular, they would be much more popular. People don't need to join some obscure communist group in order to call Trump a racist. They really don't. It's like they're not giving anyone anything they can't get for free at home in their living room on CNN. Right? Calling Trump a racist, calling Trump a sexist, calling Trump a bigot. That's pretty par for the course. You get that at any college you go to. It's like, and if that's all you offer, think about it. If you're just an average person and you're just like, I hate Donald Trump, he's racist. Are you going to join A, the Democrats, B, some woke thing on your campus, or C, an obscure communist organization that admires Stalin? I think you know the answer to that. So why would anyone join them? Like, what do you get out of, if their only selling point is we sound just like CNN, why would anyone join them? Like, what is there to offer? During the 1930s, the Communist Party supported Roosevelt, but they didn't sound just like Roosevelt. They were still communists. They just supported Roosevelt as a tactic. You read an Earl Browder book, you read William Z. Foster, they supported Roosevelt strategically, right? But these people, they just sound just like woke liberals. So what is there to gain? Right? And the idea that somehow supporting Biden is the same as supporting Roosevelt, that opposing Trump is the same as opposing fascism in the 30s. Jyoti Brar wrote a great article about this recently. This is a complete illusion. The fascism right now is coming from the liberals. It's the liberals that raided the homes of the Uhuru movement. It's the liberals that want an all-out war against Russia in Ukraine. It's the liberals that want to reduce consumption and living standards. And it's not the conservatives. The idea that modern conservatives are the equivalent of Nazis, Eurosceptics and MAGA in America are the equivalent of Nazis is such an illusion. Right? Biden is no Roosevelt and Trump is no Hitler. And J.D. Vance may have said that at one point, but he apologized. So there you go. All right, folks, I'm reaching the end of my rope, but that's okay because it's only 11:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. And then after that, I will answer questions and then I will go. So names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who's Bob in Troy, New York? Utica, Mark Jones. Very, very good. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Kakalaki, which is North and South Carolina. John McCarthy in Chicago. St. Joseph, Missouri, Finger Man. St. Louis, Timoshenko. Alex Rickel in Oregon. Doc Green for Peace. Motor City, Denver, Colorado. Dustin Schlesinger. Chris in Colbens in Germany. Fred in Silicon Valley. Ian in Chester in England. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Alex in Brazil, George from Detroit, Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia, Alex in Oakville, Ontario, Richard in United Kingdom, Mariah in North Carolina, St. David's in Bermuda, Huxley in England, Kansas City, Ryan, names and locations. Patrick in Maine, who did a great morning message this morning. Jenny in Cincinnati. Oh, Meredith and Quinn in Eatonville, Washington. Welcome. Good to be with you. Kieran in London. Kieran Pine. Welcome, Kieran. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. All right, folks. I am going to start answering people's super chat questions. I do want to say this, right? Earlier, somebody in the chat was saying, oh, why don't you do blah, 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 and get more views? I'm done with that. Every so often I do a video or a stream and it blows up. I'll take it. I like that. But out of the movement to the masses means out of the movement. means out of the movement to the masses. And we've got to get to the masses, and I got to tell you, I have told you all this before. I'll say it again. Whatever our kind of politics are, the people who sound like us, all right, whatever it is, there's not that many of us in America. And we shouldn't expect there to be. Why would there be, right? We're a very obscure interpretation of something that's already pretty obscure in America, which is Marxist-Leninist politics. So we shouldn't be shocked at all that there's a small amount of us. Now, there's a lot of social media distortion. Everything on the internet from all sides is fake. All right? It is. Okay? I'm just telling you, the internet is overwhelmingly fake. And in terms of people who think the way we think and will show up at events and actually be part of a movement, right? I don't know what you want to call us. MAGA communists. I don't like that brand because it's specifically designed to alienate anyone who is MAGA because they'll hate communists, and anyone who's a communist because they'll hate MAGA. It's not a very strategic brand, but whatever you want to call us, MAGA communists or there's different names that we go by, right? MAGA communists, anti-woke communists, whatever you want to call, whatever you want to call us. Whatever you want to call us, we are obscure. There's about 300 of us in the country who show up at stuff. Now, there might be more people who watch online. There's probably a lot of lurk watchers, and there's probably a lot of lurk watchers who don't agree with us. But in terms of total, in the whole country of people who show up at events, there's about 300 of us, right? If you look at all the events CPI has done, the biggest event we did was after the Rage Against the War Machine rally, but that had a lot of people that were there to see Scott Ritter. That wasn't all our people. But then in Oregon, we had an event that was all our people, our national convention, the first national convention of CPI. There was 160 people there. And there are some other communities that are not real organizations. They're internet fandoms. I think you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to say names. But they have never had public events. Until recently, they had one event, and there was about 200 people at their event. Right? And that's it. Now, what is more important? Being the boss of this 300 people or actually getting to the masses? Right? What's going to change society? If we get to be the boss of this group of 300 people, is that going to change society? Or if we can actually go and recruit people to our kind of politics who've never heard it before, is that going to change society? Think about it. I think you know what the answer is. And this is one thing that I want to say. I have seen this my entire life, just like Freedom Road. They joined some secret club. There are so many communists that I know, so many anti-imperialists that I know, that are playing a 3D chess game. It's a lot like Moby Dick. I don't know if you ever read Moby Dick. But Moby Dick, the novel is about a sea captain who's hunting for a whale. And the reason he's hunting for the whale is that he crippled himself. He broke his leg. He became crippled because of this whale. He spends his whole life in pursuit of this whale. And it's a tragedy, right? And that's very much what I see a lot of communists doing, right? There's a radio station in New York City called WBAI. It's been around for a long time. It's a great radio station. They got some good programming on there. But the way it works is that to be a member of WBAI, you pay a certain amount, you do so many hours of volunteering, and then you're a member, and then you have a vote. It's a community-controlled radio station, Pacifica Network. There are many, many old communists that I know who are in their 70s, and they have spent the last 40 years of their life playing a 3D chess game. If only we could take over WBAI. And I mean, they do this, right? And there's pitched battles between this faction of WBAI and that faction. And, the Maoists support this group, and the anti-vax, environmental people support this group. And there's all these like little weird, like hippie groups of old boomers that are fighting for control of WBAI. If we could only take over WBAI. And it's just like, why don't you just start a YouTube channel? You know, I didn't have to take over WBAI. I just started this YouTube channel. You know, there's a lot of communists who get jobs in the labor unions. And, you know, and they're like, oh, you know, if we can maneuver against the labor union bosses and we can seize control of the unions and we get them to pass this resolution. No, right? You said it, not me. And there's all these traps that people get in where they're playing elaborate 3D chess and not doing what needs to be done. And CPI was founded on the premise of just do it. That's what our organization was founded on. We didn't wait for anybody's permission. We just did it, right? We just did it. I felt like giving a class on a topic. I did it. We felt like writing a book. We wrote a book. We wanted to convene a meetup. We convened it. Just do it. Stop trying to get, you know, it's like people are convinced they need permission from somebody. So it's this elaborate game of like, how do I pass the resolution and do this and that so I can get permission? No, just don't do that. And it's a trap. And if you do that, if you fall into that rut, you're never going to do anything. Okay, I'm just telling you that. And there's a million of these ruts that I see where it's like, it's always, if we could just do this, if we could just do that, if we could just do it. Don't try to get permission from the union bureaucrats. Don't try to take over WBAI. Don't conspire to push the Communist Party to just do it. Just do what needs to be done. Damn it. That's why we have CPI. Right? That's why we have CPI. Right? And that's what CPI has always been about. We just do it. Right? We do the best we can with what we've got. We try to build up more resources and we just do it. And that's why CPI drives these people crazy. That's why there's so much jealousy about CPI. I've never seen the amount of jealousy towards CPI, right? People that get boosted on social media like crazy, people that, you know, and they are so jealous of CPI because they can't just actually do it. They're trying to get social media to boost and just do it, right? Just do it. If you want to do it, just do it. And what needs to happen is we need to recruit the masses. That's what needs to happen is we need to recruit the masses. And certain people have been appointed by social media to be the bosses of our wing of politics. And for a while, they were friendly to us, and then they all lined up against us out of pure spite and jealousy, out of fear of getting canceled on the internet, which doesn't work, right? Out of competitiveness and spite and jealousy, they lined up against us. You all know who I'm talking about, right? And some of them spread lies about us. Some of them viciously went after us. And some of them didn't exactly do that. They just sucked up to the people who did while not defending us. And all the things we get attacked for, patriotic socialism, opposing degrowth, they adopt those politics, but conveniently ever forget to acknowledge us, right? Midwest Marx is a piece of shit outfit. I will just tell you that right now, right? They are probably watching this right now and taking notes so that their next event or their next article, they can say exactly what I said on here, but conveniently forget to ever defend us when we get under attack, conveniently forget to ever give us play or attention, right? And it's not about plagiarism, right? It's not like I own this stuff. I learned it from other people. It's that they are consciously watching our material and taking it to try and use it against us because they see us as competitors. Right? And I mean, I'll just be real with you, right? That's what they do, right? We did all of this stuff, patriotic socialism, opposing degrowth, etc. Right? No, he does know me personally. He has all of my books at his house. He's told multiple people that. They pay attention to everything we do, and then they exclude us, and then they don't defend us, and they're they're sucking up to somebody and to various people. And they exclude us, and they never try to include us in anything. And they go out of their way to never acknowledge us. And if you talk to them in person, they always go, oh, yeah, we love Caleb. Oh, yeah, we know CPI. But publicly, they will never acknowledge that CPI exists. They will never give me credit for anything. They will never thank us for anything we do, right? They will never defend us when we're being viciously attacked, right? They always, they don't know us. And they're jealous of us. And that's very clear, right? Because and we're not trying to lock them out. I wrote articles for them when they first started. I was friendly to them. But they are competitive assholes. That's all they are. And they're just trying to build an internet fandom. They don't care about building a mass movement. They're competitive assholes. And they only care about building a social media milieu. And there are certain people that are convinced that what CPI should do is we should go to their events, even though they don't invite us, and sit in the back of the room and go, oh, will you please be nice to us? Will you please be friendly? We'll do whatever you say. We're not going to do that. We have some fucking self-respect. Midwest Marx is a piece of crap organization, right? They are literally watching this right now. I hope they are, because I want them to hear this. They are literally watching everything we do so they can copy it and use it against us. And there are certain people who are convinced that it would be the best use of CPI's time to go and beg them for approval because they have bigger social media numbers than we do. Folks, social media isn't real. Social media is not real. And if they want to get along with CPI, all it would take, they've got my email, they work with people who've got my phone number, and they've got Twitter. All it would take is one tweet acknowledging that how my life was destroyed over patriotic socialism, how I got escorted out of events, how my wife lost friends, how that was wrong, and that I did patriotic socialism before they did, and they respect what I did. Just one fucking tweet. Just one. That's all they would need to do. But they won't do that. Just one, when they write articles about degrowth, just one time say, Caleb and Peter Coffin were talking about this long before we did, and we respect them, and we may not agree on something. Just one time. Acknowledge what this community has been through, the persecution that we have faced, to pave the way for them to run their social media grift. Just one time, acknowledge what we've been through. But they won't do that. They won't do that. So until then, they can go fuck themselves. They can go fuck themselves, right? And who cares? Who cares? Right? We didn't form CPI to try and recruit other people who already talk the same way we do on the internet. My God, the whole point of our organization is out of the movement to the masses. I've been saying that since the beginning. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. That's the whole fucking point. And if we're not getting to the masses, why are we waving American flags? Why are we friendly toward religion? I mean, if we're just building an internet niche, maybe we should be obscure. Maybe we should burn the American flag. Maybe we should invent a new obscure ideology. Maybe we shouldn't try to use coherent language that normal people can understand. Right? What we're doing doesn't make any sense if our goal is to get Midwest Marx to like us. Right? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Look, we've had people leave CPI, and that was their position, right? Oh, it's all, Caleb is so competitive against Midwest Marx and all these people. Yeah, I'm competitive against them. Number one, because they're competitive against us after we've been nothing but kind to them. And two, because they don't want to work with us. And they've made it clear they don't consider us friendly. And there were people that were really nasty to us. And we tried for months after that to heal things. And we were nice to them for months after that. And we didn't fight back for months after that. It made no difference. And, we have got to just decide, look, we were formed as an organization to get to the masses. And that means we go to the masses. It doesn't mean we try to get Midwest Marks to like us. If they want to like us, they can like us anytime. One tweet, one invitation, one acknowledgement, but they won't do that because they're pieces of shit. They're pieces of shit, and they're concerned about their social media numbers. And, and that's it, right? And they're just going to keep watching whatever we do and copying it to use it with their friends who boycott us. And they can do that if they want. We don't care. They can do that. We don't care. I mean, fine, right? Exactly. Right? They can do that. We're not going to stop them. Right? And if they want to make things right with us, there's very easy ways to do that. Nobody has to be a back channel, and no one has to jump on my stream and say, I like you, and I know Eddie, Caleb, I know Carl. Oh, shut the fuck up. Eddie can contact me anytime. Carlos can contact me anytime. Any of these people can reach me anytime. I'm tired of people trying to play games with me, right? These Midwest Marks are my enemies because they won't speak in support of us, because they won't acknowledge what we've been through, because they are too busy sucking up to very bad, evil people who have really tried to harm our organization. They can go fuck themselves. And if they want to change that, fine. But this idea, right? This idea that it is our job to suck up to Midwest Marks, I don't know what these people are smoking, because with Midwest Marks doesn't matter. And I know, but I saw one of their tweets had thousands of... No, it didn't. There's less than 300 people in MAGA communism, in patriotic socialism, in anti-woke communism, whatever you want to call, whatever we are in this sphere, there's about 300 of us. That's great. And I love you all. But the whole point of us even existing is to get to the masses. And Midwest Marks doesn't want to do that. They want to win the internet. They want to grift. And they are convinced that in order to do that, they have to get certain very bad people to boost them. Certain bad people whose following is also very small. And because of that, they are boycotting us, right? And they are boycotting us while watching our material and copying it, while admitting to people in person, never publicly, because, oh no, they wouldn't want to get canceled. But in public, they don't know us, but privately admitting to people they have all of my books. People have seen, they have stacks of my books there. They read everything I do, right? And I don't mind that. And I'm glad people are putting out the ideas, and I'm glad I'm educating people, right? And there's plenty of people and institutions that take what we do on here. And I don't want credit for everything, but I don't appreciate being boycotted. I don't appreciate when people see that we're being smeared and they know those smears are false and they keep silent because they're sucking up to the people smearing me, right? I'm not okay with that. When the Uhuru movement got raided by the FBI, we supported them because it was the right thing to do. I don't agree with the Uhuru movement and their analysis of the white working class and stuff. Doesn't matter. They're under attack for being anti-imperialist. I support them. But these people, Midwest Marks and certain other people, what they did is they saw that I was under attack and they knew it was bullshit. And they said, oh, this is an opportunity. Now people will watch us and not watch Caleb. And they sat there and they cheered on the attacks and they sucked up to the people attacking us. They're evil people. They're evil people, right? They're evil people. And all they have to do is contact me. All they have to do is be polite. And they won't do that, because they are more concerned about what certain people think of them than what is right. And so they can go fuck themselves. And you know why we don't need them as friends? Because if the FBI ever raided us, they would do the same thing, right? They would do the same thing, right? So, I just wanted to get that out there. I mean, we got to be clear about some things. And it's like, look, I mean, and I really, like I said, I don't appreciate people. And I know as soon as I do this stream, As soon as, this stream is over, I'm going to have 5 emails in my inbox from people. I know, Eddie, I can fix this. No, you can't. No, you can't. Eddie could fix this anytime. Carlos could fix this anytime, but they won't. That's the point, right? And they don't need you to do it. And they'll probably, if you talk to them, and they'll probably lead you on, this could be fixed at any time. It would take one tweet from them. It would take one positive statement from them. It would take what, but they won't do that, right? It's just a fandom and a commodified identity. And they're just trying to grift and make money. And, that's all there is to it. And, I don't claim to be a genius. I don't claim that I invented all this stuff. I didn't invent all this stuff. I learned it. I studied. But the way I learned it was by building a real movement. I would not be anywhere if the RCP had not sent me out on the street to sell newspapers when I was 15. I would not be anywhere if I hadn't gone and traveled to communist countries, if I hadn't been part of organizing with people, right? I learned through struggle. That's, if you want to learn anything from Mao and Little Red Book, it's knowledge comes from correct practical experience. So I don't claim that I copyright this or this is my intellectual property. It's not the point. The point is you learn through struggle. You learn by getting to the masses, by engaging with people. That's how you learn. So if they want to learn and do what I did, they should go and do it. Yeah. It's true. It's true, Doug. It's true. So, that's my position, right? And I've told it to numerous people in the last few days. And I am really happy because stuff is finally not showing up in my feeds. I hate social media because social media is designed to incite you. It's designed to make you angry. And I have finally gotten my social media feeds to not feature these people just because they sound like me. Midwest Marx and certain others, they sound a lot like me. And because they sound like me, they show up in my feed all the goddamn time, and I don't want to see these people. If they were my friends, I might want to see them. If they were nice to me, I might want to see them. If they weren't trying to destroy CPI and suck up to people who are trying to destroy our community, I might care what they think. I don't care what they think. I'm really happy. I don't see them. I don't see them, right? And I just don't care. I just don't care. I don't see them. Out of sight, out of mind. We've got a job to do. And you're welcome. And look, and let me get this straight. I'm telling you how I feel about Midwest Marx. I know very well there are people in CPI who love Midwest Marx, who think I'm totally wrong about this. That's fine. You're allowed to be in CPI if you will help out CPI with our mission. That's what we're here to do. We have a mission. We have an education that we're doing. We are anti-imperialists. We are dedicated. That's what we're doing. If you want to help out with it, you're welcome. We're not competing with these people. They're competing with us, but we're not competing with these people. They're welcome to be part of it, and CPI members are welcome. We're not going to kick anybody out because they like Midwest Marx too much or something like that. And that's the thing. But we have a job to do, and our job is a serious job. And the government is actually trying to stop us from doing that job. And there has been a vicious personal campaign against my character. And all they would need to do is make clear they don't support what's being done to me. Just like we supported Uhuru and the FBI raided them, but they won't do that. And I can guarantee you, if the FBI ever raided our homes, they would find a way that we deserved it and we're fucking gay or something like that. They're evil people, right? You don't need friends like this. Right? If people can't support you when you're under attack, they're not your friend. Right? I mean, it's just that simple, right? Right? And if these people can't support me when I'm under attack, they won't support you when you're under attack. And you should keep that in mind. Backstabbers backstab, traitors betray. Right? That's how these things work. That's how these things work. And so, if people are your friend until you get targeted, if people are your friend until there's a risk involved, if people are your friend, as long as people they think are important are not looking, they're not your friends. They're not. And we are not interested in being the kings of MAGA communism. We're not. We are not interested in that. We're not. The algorithms have been rigged to pick certain people to be the kings of this tiny milieu, right? So there we go. Anyway, so on that note, I am going to start answering questions. I'm sorry you all had to hear that, but I just wanted to be clear on that. I just wanted you all to know where I stand, right? And you know, I want that message to be out there. I've said it on the last few streams, but it's true. Hard times reveal true friends, and if people can't so much as acknowledge that what's been done to our community is wrong, like why in the world is it the best use of our time to go and beg them to treat us decently? All they have to do is be nice. All they have to do is fucking be nice. That's all these assholes have to do is be nice. And they can't do it because they're too busy pleasing people who have done very evil things. All right. Anyway, my theory is that they tried to unalive him because nothing else worked. The fact the guy was allowed to come. Yeah, I'm leaning toward that myself, Gala. I don't want to say things that I don't know. I'm very careful. But if you listen to my stream, I mean, you were on earlier. You sent this pretty early on. And you heard what I said, Gala. And yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like to me. And that doesn't necessarily mean, and that's the problem with this, right, is that people tend to interpret this as meaning, well, therefore, you're saying that Trump is this great revolutionary who can never do anything. That's not what I said. That's not what I said. I'm saying that there is a division in the ruling class, right? There is a division in the ruling class, and Donald Trump is a threat to the regime change apparatus, just like Kennedy was a threat to the military-industrial complex. Does that mean Kennedy didn't do Bay of Pigs? Does that mean? No. But there are divisions in the ruling class, and the ruling class have competing interests. They fight among each other, and it's getting heated because when the economic crisis intensifies, when living standards go down, conditions deteriorate, the fights in the ruling class become more intense and more serious because the stakes are higher. So I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking that that's what happened. I think there's a very good chance that's what happened. I'm not going to say anything until we have solid proof, but if people think that Donald Trump said, just shoot me in my ear, that is so ridiculous. That is so ridiculous. And if you think there weren't real bullets flying, tell me about the guy behind him. They say, oh, well, Donald Trump had a razor and he cut it. No. What about the people behind him who died, got shot? I'm sorry, but no, this was very real. What happened? This wasn't a staged event. This was very, very real. All righty. All right. I did see that speech, John, and I listened to it earlier. It was very good. I would show it on here, but it's getting close to midnight, and I have to get up early because I have to be at the UN tomorrow. So, I do appreciate it. Chairman O'Malley is amazing, and I stand with you, Huru. And I stand with you, Huru, and and it's a great speech, and we can play it on a future stream, just not tonight. All right. There's a relationship between the John Birch Society and the JFK assassination. Guy Bannister was Oswald's handler in New Orleans before he went to New York. That's interesting. So Guy Bannister. Okay. I mean, I know the John Birch Society put up, they put up billboards with Kennedy in that's interesting. That's interesting. So you're saying this Bircher guy, who was an FBI informant, was following around Oswald. That's interesting. That's very interesting, right? I know that picture of Oswald with the father of Ted Cruz. That picture is real, and it lines up. I mean, Ted Cruz's father admits he was part of the Fair Play Committee for Cuba Committee, and he lived in New Orleans, and so he was out leafleting with Lee Harvey Oswald at one point. That really happens. So there you go. There you go. So that's interesting. Guy Bannister was Oswald's handler. Yeah, well, I mean, in my book, Letter to Bob Avakian, which, I knew this book wasn't going to sell massively. But, this is probably my best book, in my opinion, because I use the art of the polemic And I first start talking about his strengths and all the great things about him. This is not an unprincipled smear, which is what somebody told me the RCP tells people. If you mention this to the RCP, they say it's an unprincipled smear. And it's like, no, it's not. I spend the first 20 pages praising him. And some people think I praise him over the top. I don't think I do. I think I give him the credit he deserves. This is an 80-year-old man who's given his life to communism and has done a lot of great things, but he's got a worldview that is fundamentally pessimistic, and he's got an interpretation of communism that is not economically sound. He's basically a Blanquist. And I also talk about Western goals and the John Birch Society and how they manipulated communist groups. And so what you're telling me about Guy Bannister and all of that, in this book, I kind of reveal how they were used against the Carter administration. And I reveal that in this book with new information from FBI files that have been released and stuff. And I show some important things about the John Birch Society infiltrating communist groups and all that stuff. So might be worth looking into, And in this book, I also talk about my religious conversion, and I talk about a lot of different things. This is, again, if you really want to know how I see things and how my views stand up against woke communism, I would recommend this book. It hasn't sold that many copies, right? The MAGA, the Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution, well over 200. It's like 300, 400 copies of that have sold. This book, it's like less than 50 copies. And that's fine, right? I didn't write it to make money. But if you really want to know where I stand, read this book. All righty. Next question. All right. Why did the Communist Party not support the students of France in 1968? Well, the main reason was that they feared civil war, right? They were in strategic equilibrium. They were functioning in French society. They ran the labor unions. They had a very big percentage of the people of the country supporting them. And they feared that if a communist-led student uprising toppled Charles de Gaulle, and they would become the new government, and that would lead to civil war. And they were very afraid. They got too comfortable, and that's one of the problems, right? The revolutionary organizations have three phases of existence. Now they go back and forth, right? It's not like a straight line, but there's what's called strategic defensive, which is you're just existing, right? You're struggling to exist, and that's what we're in now, right? Where a revolutionary organization is just struggling to stay intact, and the strategic defensive period is the period where there's a lot of splits and there's a lot of demoralization and there's a lot of because why stay together? You don't see progress during the period of strategic defensive. That's the main thing here. I'll put the graphic on the screen, right? But then you can enter what's called a state of strategic equilibrium. And that's where the balance of forces is such, the crisis in society, the divisions in the ruling class, etc., get to the point that you're able to exist, right? You're able to be part of the political discourse. And because you're able to be part of the political discourse, you're allowed to function openly. You're allowed to be part of the political process. You can get seats in parliament. You can have bookstores in every neighborhood. You can have, and that's the Communist Party USA was like that in the 1930s. And the French Communist Party was like that, from the 1920s and 30s up until later. I'm sorry, I don't know where the graphic is. Right. But I have a graphic about this, but that period has the danger that it's very stale. Right. And so in May of 1968, the students were rising up, and the Communist Party was like, oh no, we don't want to risk this. We don't want to risk this. And the students who were rising up were largely Maoists and Trotskyites and New Left kind of people. And the French Communist Party was more of an industrial union-based organization. They didn't trust the young radicals, and they were afraid of what the implications would be of, they got scared, right? And it's a tragedy because they should have seized the moment, but they didn't. And that's an example of strategic equilibrium becoming stale. If you are in strategic equilibrium too long, you become just a part of the society you live in, right? And that's the problem, right? You want to exist in society so you can make a revolution, right? Strategic defensive, you're struggling to hold your group together, right? To just function. And that's the period that all communist groups in the USA have been in since the 50s. In the 70s, we were maybe starting to very vaguely approach strategic equilibrium, but that fell apart very quickly, right? We've been in strategic defensive, but we're entering a period where strategic equilibrium could be possible. But if you're in strategic equilibrium for too long, pretty soon you become stale and you lose your revolutionary energy, and you just become part of the existing, fabric, the existing scenery of politics. But if you're in strategic equilibrium and the crisis intensifies and there's an intense polarization of society and you are a vital force on one side of that polarization, then you can enter a strategic offensive and you can take power, right? In a lot of communist revolutions, it's been that fascism was on the horizon and they were the main anti-fascists. And so fascism was defeated and they came to power because they were the anti-fascist group. The Bolshevik Revolution, they came to power because they were the anti-war group. They were the ones that wanted to end World War I. And there was a big division in the ruling class and in society about ending World War I. And the Bolsheviks were the ones who said, end World War I. And on that basis, they were able to take power. And that's a strategic offensive is where the communists are big enough. And they're like a big enough layer of one side that they can kind of force their way into power. And that's strategic offensive. So there you go. But, communist groups go back and forth from all of this, right? The Communist Party of China was in strategic equilibrium as part of the KMT government in the 1920s. And then in 1927, Chiang Kai-shek launched his White Terror, and then they went back into strategic defensive. But then they were back in strategic equilibrium again. And then they were back on strategic offensive and they had the Long March. This Chinese Soviet Republic was crushed. And then, it's, it's not a straight line. It's not like one day we're in this, then we're in this, then we're in this. It's not that way. There are different modes of operation and all of them are dangerous. In the period we're in, the danger is liquidation because you're not seeing an immediate payout. Right? You're not seeing results. And when people aren't seeing results, why stay together? Right? Why not break away and form your own group? We're not going to get results anyway. Right? During periods of strategic defensive, a lot of people, it becomes kind of obscure. It becomes, because it's just not able to really blossom and be part of the political scene. Now, strategic equilibrium at that point, you have the ability to exist. You become there you go. And then strategic offensive, you are the main fighting force. There's a big division in society over an issue, and you are the overwhelming force on one side. And with that momentum, you become the government, right? And, that's the way these things tend to work, and they all have their risks. If you lose strategic offensive, the result is the complete smashing of your organization. If the Bolsheviks, they had been the main anti-war party and the pro-war faction had taken power, the Bolsheviks would have been smashed and they would have been way back in strategic defensive. There's, if World War II, the communists were the main anti-fascist fighting force and the Nazis had won, the communists would have been smashed. They would have been reduced to strategic defensive once again. Right? So all of these phases, strategic defensive, you have the danger of liquidation and the danger of political deviation, right? You're not seeing results. So maybe you should be left adventure terrorists, right? Maybe you should be reformists and sellouts, right? There's no payout for following the true line. People tend to want, results, and they're not seeing results. So they'll try to take a shortcut to get results, whatever. So you can deviate, split, divide, liquidate, right? That's the danger in strategic defensive. The strategic equilibrium, the danger there is that it becomes stale, that you lose your revolutionary energy and you deteriorate into being just part of the scenery of the existing society. And then strategic offensive, the danger is you lose, right? When Japan invaded China, the communists, they became very effective, heroic anti-fascist fighters. And what if Japan had won? They would have been back in strategic defensive. And the Communist Party of China, they were in strategic defensive. When they first formed, they were a group. They met in the basement of a women's dormitory. The police chased them out of there, and then they had their final, the founding meeting of the Chinese Communist Party was in the basement of the women's dormitory of a college. There were 20 people there, right? And then the police chased them out of there, and so they got on a boat on a lake, and they finished it on a boat on a lake where the police wouldn't interrupt them. And it was like 20 people, tiny group, but they strategically made the decision of aligning with Chiang Kai-shek and the KMT. And the Soviet Union started providing military training, and the Soviet Union started supporting the KMT. And so they started growing in huge numbers. And they were a very big political party in China during the First Chinese Republic. But then the leader of the First Chinese Republic, Chiang Kai-shek, started attacking them and murdering them. So they retreated to the countryside, and they were in strategic defensive again. But then they started seizing liberated territory, and they became the champions of the peasant uprisings, the peasant revolts that were happening. The peasants were already rising up. They didn't make that happen. But they realized that by making themselves the party that gave voice to the peasant movement, they could become and eventually they set up the Chinese Soviet Republic, and they had a big chunk of territory that peasant revolutionaries organized by the communists had established. And the Chinese Soviet Republic declared itself an independent government. A lot of people don't even know about the Chinese Soviet Republic, right? They don't know that any of this exists, right? Yeah, there was the Chinese Soviet Republic. Chinese Soviet Republic, 1931. It was officially dissolved in 37, but it was crushed long before that. And they had the Chinese Soviet Republic, and they had a big chunk of territory. They had their own flag and everything, and they had a big chunk of China. But then the German government and the British government teamed up with Chiang Kai-shek, and they crushed the Chinese Soviet Republic. And they went all in with airplanes and everything, and they crushed the Chinese Soviet Republic. And so they were in strategic defensive once again, and they went into the mountains, and they did the long march up in the mountains. That's a good line. But anyway, and they did the long march up in the mountains, and then Japan invaded, and they came down from the mountain 10 times stronger than when they went up, and Japan invaded, and they got the KMT to sign a military alliance against Japan, and they fought Japan, and they came out of World War II with a huge amount of territory that they had liberated from Japan. And then they wanted to form a coalition government with Chiang Kai-shek. And Chiang Kai-shek said no, because he wanted the U.S. to give them Marshall Plan aid, and so he wouldn't let them be part of the government. And they're like, that's ridiculous. We've lost thousands of people fighting Japan. We're millions of people fighting Japan. We're heroic anti-fascist, anti-Japanese fighters. We have the right to be part of the government. And then Chiang Kai-shek started trying to disarm their military. And they said, no. You killed at least 100,000 of us in 1927. You want us to give up our guns? We're not giving up our guns. And so they fought. Yes, the Chinese Revolution was fought for the right to bear arms, was fought for the Second Amendment. The People's Liberation Army that had fought Japan was told they had to give up their guns, and they weren't going to do it. They had fought Japan. They had created liberated territory. The 8th Route Army was not going to give up their guns. And that was the fight that led to the Civil War that ultimately led to the Chinese Communist Party being victorious. And that's at that point when they were telling them to give up their guns, they're like, no, we're not going to give up their guns. And ultimately, though, the Civil War got going. But what was the turning point that put Mao over the edge to become the leader of New China? What was the turning point? Well, first of all, the Chinese communists made clear they would not nationalize. They would not nationalize anything for the first 10 years, right? They made clear we're not having a communist revolution. We're having a new democratic revolution. And that's what they made clear. The communists will lead what they called the new democratic revolution. And that was very clear, as their program was called the New Democratic Revolution. And you can read about the concept of new democracy. And that was the thing. They said, we're going to take power to create not socialism and communism, because China's too poor to have that. We are going to oversee a new democratic revolution. And they developed a program that many people in China could agree with called New Democracy. And you can read all about New Democracy, which is very important. But then after that, the main thing was that Chiang Kai-shek had this brilliant idea to confiscate all the rich people's gold and give them paper currency. And so Chiang Kai-shek confiscated all the rich people's gold and gave them paper currency. And then the paper currency crashed. And you can read about the golden yuan, right? They created the golden yuan, and they confiscated all the rich people's gold, and instead they gave them this currency, 1948, and the currency became worthless. And at that point, a lot of China's millionaires and billionaires said, all right, read about it, golden yuan. A lot of Chinese millionaires and billionaires said, okay, the communists are better than this. We'll take them. You know, Mao, he has the new democratic program. He's not going to seize our property and such. And he didn't, right? For the 1950s, China, you know, did not confiscate. There were millionaires in China. You know, they didn't start, you know, nationalizing things en masse until the 60s. So, you know, for the first decade or so, they stood true to their word. They had the new democratic revolution where the government built new industries with Soviet aid, but they allowed the private sector was pretty much untouched. You know, I mean, this is important history. But yeah, when the final straw was when Chiang Kai-shek made that fatal mistake and took all the rich people's gold, and then their gold became worthless. All right. You're the best, Gabby. You're awesome. And, you know, it's weird because our organization is on fire right now. We are marching ahead like we've never marched ahead before. We had 27 people at the last Saturday meeting. We had 25 at the one before that. I mean, it's like our membership is energized and ready to roll. People are meeting people and getting contacts, and it's like really exciting what we're doing now. But this is a change. There's a new energy. We're changing the way we operate. We are just firm, adamant that we are not going to try and waste our time with Midwest Marx and other people. And we are adamant about expanding and recruiting and recruiting normal people and making contacts. And we're changing, right? And it's a change for the better. And our membership is all excited about it. They're like, it's about time. But it's a hard change, right? These things are not easy, right? These things are not easy. And, you know, it's a difficult hurdle, but we're going to get over that hurdle. And we're going to achieve our goals. And I'm very excited. And, you know, if people want to come with us and achieve our goals, great. And if people don't, they don't have to. But you know, strategic equilibrium is coming. We are entering a period where an organization like ours will be able to exist and flourish as part of society. And we need to be ready for that period. We need to be ready. And if we're not ready, and that period comes, other forces that are not good will seize the moment, and we will not, right? We have a contribution to make, and we have to just do it. And that's the whole premise of CPI from the beginning. And thank you, Alex. The whole premise of CPI from the beginning is just do it. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Just do it. Just do it. We got a job to do. We got a message to get out there. Let's do it. Let's do it. So on that note, I got to get up early tomorrow. Great things are happening, but yeah. So thanks, everybody. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.